This is a reading from the book entitled Catholic Prophecy, The Coming Chastisement by Yves Dupont. '72. Sister Marie of Jesus crucified, 19th century. All the nations will be shaken by war and revolution. During the 3 days of darkness, the followers of the evil cause will be annihilated, so that only 1/4 of mankind will survive. 73. Brother Anthony of Aachen, 19th century. Some day war will break out again in Alsace. I saw the French in Alsace with Strasbourg at their rear, and I saw Italians fighting with them. Suddenly, great transports of troops arrived from the French side. A 2-day battle ensued with the defeat of the Prussian army. The French pursued the Prussians over the Rhine in many directions. In a second battle, at Frankfurt, the Prussians lost again and retreated as far as Siegburg, where they joined with the Russian army. The Russians made common cause with the Prussians. It seemed to me as if Austrians also were helping the French. The Battle of Siegburg was more terrible than any before, and its like will never occur again. After some days the Prussians and Russians retreated and crossed to the left bank of the Rhine below Bonn. Steadily pressed by their opponents, they retired to Cologne, which had been bombed so much that only 1/4 of the city remained intact. Constantly in retreat, what was left of the Prussians moved to Westphalia, where the last battle went against them. People greatly rejoiced because they were freed from the Prussians. Then a new emperor, about 40 years old, was elected in Germany, and he met the Pope. Meanwhile, epidemics broke out in the regions devastated by war, and many people died. After the Battle of Westphalia, the French returned to their country, and from then on there was peace between the French and the Germans. All exiles returned to their homes. When I begged God to take the terrible vision away, I heard a voice saying, "Prussia must be humiliated in such a manner that it will never again bring sorrow to the Church." In the following year, the Russians will war with the Turks, driving the latter out of Europe and taking Constantinople. The new German emperor will mobilize for war, but the Germans will not go beyond their frontiers. When, afterwards, I was shown France and Germany, I shuddered at the losses that had taken place. Soon after the Russian-Turkish War, England also will be visited by war. Comment. A question arises. Who are the soldiers called the Prussians? Are these East Germans only? It is fairly certain that East Germany will move first, but it must not be forgotten that Prussia does not consist of East Prussia only. It comprises also Brandenburg, Pomerania, Grenzmark, Silesia, Saxony, Schleswig-Holstein, Hanover, Westphalia, Hesse-Nassau, Rhineland, and Hohenzollern, in fact the whole of northern Germany. Many of these states are now part of West Germany. Will West Germany then remain faithful to the West? It is difficult to say. The fortunes of politics can change almost overnight in a democracy. Under Chancellor Adenauer, West Germany was quite decidedly pro-Western, but will she remain so under another leader? This is doubtful. There is much in these prophecies which appears to indicate that West Germany will sign an agreement with, and subsequently be dominated by, East Germany. In the context of these prophecies, therefore, the word Prussia should not be interpreted in the restrictive sense of East Germany, but rather in the broader sense of Germany, especially northern Germany, with the possible, but possible only, exception of Bavaria and other southern Catholic states. 74. Fatima, 20th century. Our Lady said, "If my requests are granted, Russia will be converted, and there will be peace. If not, Russia will spread her errors in every country, raising up wars and persecution against the Church. Many will be martyred. The Holy Father will have much to suffer, and many nations will be destroyed." Comment. This message was given shortly before communism took over in Russia. The revelations of Fatima have been confirmed by Pius XII, John XXIII, and Paul VI. No Catholic worthy of the name can ignore them. This does not mean, however, that the other revelations given in this book are open to doubt. Quite the opposite. Most of them have been taken from Catholic hagiography and are completely reliable too. But Fatima is more recent and has been given a wider publicity. Although less explicit than many others, the words have been sanctioned by a spectacular miracle, the reality of which can be ascertained from the Portuguese newspapers of that time, which were by no means favorably disposed to the Church. The message of Fatima in its entirety can be summed up as follows: do penance and pray the rosary, or else. Russia will spread her errors throughout the world. Terrible persecutions will take place. Many nations will be destroyed. The Pope will have much to suffer. The Church will be split into two camps. But peace will finally be given to the world. Many other messages have been given to the world since 1917. Borang, Banneux, Osnabrück, Girkalnis, Bonat, Canderosa, Heed, Pfaffenhofen, Montichiari, Espis, Gimigliano, Sisov, Sicily, Neseda, Garabandal, San Damiano, Mexico, Quebec, New Norcia, and many others. Some have already been approved by the Church. Some are still being investigated. Others have been the object of a negative judgment, and still others have been condemned. All these recent messages, however, confirm what the other prophecies say. 2. The comet. Comets are fiery bodies hurtling through space, which, unlike the stars, are of low density, and unlike the planets, have orbits around the sun that are very eccentric. Comets consist of 3 different parts: the head, the hair, and the tail. The hair is formed of gases, the brightness of which lessens the farther it reaches from the head. When passing close to the sun, a comet emits a tail which always remains in the direction of the sun, and not necessarily behind the comet. The tail does not later return to the comet, but disperses into space. When the tail of a comet crosses the path of a planet, its remnants crash to the ground. More than 60 comets are known to belong to our solar system, and they reappear at intervals up to 80 years. But it is estimated that there exist hundreds of thousands of comets, and it is not known whether some will ever reappear. About 500 are sighted through telescopes every 100 years, and it is thought that their average cycle is equal to tens of thousands of years. It can be assumed that the larger of these comets would cause such disturbances in the solar system that life on the planets would be greatly affected. However, many civilizations would have time to develop, flourish, and perish between 2 consecutive passages of such long cycle comets. And the passage of a comet need not mean the complete annihilation of human life. Indeed, almost all the ancient civilizations known to man have left evidence of such destruction by comets. It is quite likely that the destructions recorded in the book of Exodus were caused by a comet. Comets cause fears which are often quite groundless, but it must not be inferred that such fears are always due to ignorance or superstition. The comet of Brooke, for example, hit Jupiter in 1886, and as a consequence, the comet's cycle was changed from 29 to 7 years, whereas Jupiter was delayed by only 2 minutes, which shows the disproportion between the mass of a comet and that of a planet. Nevertheless, such an encounter is more than sufficient to wipe out all traces of life on a planet. If the comet's atmosphere is composed of methane, as is sometimes the case, the Earth's atmosphere would be irremediably poisoned. Well, that's arguable, but okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Concerning Exodus, let us recall briefly a situation which afflicted the Egyptians: the crossing dry shod of the Red Sea and the prolonged duration of the day. In Mexico, on the other hand, a prolonged night was recorded, as evidenced by archaeological discoveries. The passage of a comet at that time was recorded not only in the book of Exodus, but also in other documents. An Egyptian papyrus, a Mexican manuscript, a Finnish narration, and many others. The book of Exodus, it is true, does not speak of the comet itself, but only of what certainly appears to be its logical effects. We have seen that Nostradamus and other prophets use the term bloody and ferruginous when speaking of the light of the comet which is to come, but it is never referred to as fiery red. This is in perfect accord with ancient records on the Exodus comet. Non igneo sed sanguineo rubore fuisse. It was not the redness of fire, but the redness of blood. Will the comet to come be the same as that of Exodus? It is not impossible, when we consider the description of the plagues as given in Exodus and those described in our Christian prophecies. When the tail of the Exodus comet crossed the path of the earth, a red dust, impalpable, like fine flour, began to fall. It was too fine to be seen, which is why it is not named in Exodus chapter 7, verse 21. But it colored everything red, and the water of the Egyptians was changed into blood. The fish died, and the water was poisoned by the decomposition of their flesh. It is for this reason that the Egyptians had to scratch the earth, that is to say, to open new wells. A similar occurrence was recorded in various parts of the world. After the fine rusty pigment fell over Egypt, there followed a coarser dust, like ash. This is recorded in Exodus, for when it was visible, this ash irritated the skin and eyes of both men and animals. They scratched themselves, and sores formed, boils appeared, and changed into pustules for want of being treated. Soon the infection spread to the whole body, and death followed. After that ash-like substance came a shower of fine sand, then coarse sand, grit, gravel, small stones, large stones, and finally boulders. The narrative of the book of Exodus confirms this, and this in turn corroborated by various documents found in Mexico, Finland, Siberia, Egypt, and India. It is therefore certain that a comet crossed the path of the earth more than 3,000 years ago, causing widespread destruction. This is the kind of phenomenon, if the prophecies are accurate, which is soon to strike the earth again. And now, as it was then, this exceptional occurrence will be permitted by God as a punishment for the sins of men. Mountains will literally split open. The sea will overrun whole provinces and possibly even small nations such as Holland. Some coastal plains will just collapse into the sea. The sky will be on fire in many places when the oxygen of the Earth's atmosphere will ignite the hydrogen of the comet's tail. As a result, tremendous hurricanes will be induced, adding to the devastation. The oxygen supply being used up in those regions where the sky fire will rage, people who leave their houses will die from asphyxiation, which is probably why many prophecies say, "Stay indoors, keep your windows shut." But the hurricanes will promptly bring back fresh supplies of oxygen, with the effect that this ordeal will be of very short duration. Then torrential rains will fall, quenching the many fires on earth, but at the same time causing widespread flooding. After all these disasters, food will be so scarce that a general famine will follow. Millions of people will starve to death. Their unburied bodies will cause pestilence and epidemics all over the land. And so, the loss of life through natural disturbances will be such as to make appear negligible the number of lives lost through human acts of war. For the above reasons, it would have been misleading to call the great disaster World War III. Admittedly, the prophecies do not give a description of the many plagues that will strike mankind in the manner I have just detailed, and I may possibly be wrong in some details, but the prophecies do insist on the occurrence of those plagues, namely, fire in the sky, fires on earth, hail of stones, violent lightning, complete darkness, gigantic earthquakes, tidal waves, droughts, floods, air made irrespirable, tremendous hurricanes, famines, epidemics, and the presence of a comet. In other words, the prophecies list the various plagues, but without giving an overall picture. In my opinion, the comet will be responsible for the other plagues in the order which I have tentatively indicated. Let me elaborate on this point in tabloid form for greater clarity. The comet approaches the Earth. Climactic changes take place. Droughts and floods occur. Summer is cold because the comet's gases interfere with normal solar radiation. The comet is now very close. Climactic change worsens. Food shortages begin. Winter is hot because the comet is now close enough to radiate its own heat. Hail of stones. This occurs either before or after the sky fire and is preceded by a rain of dust and is caused by the comet's tail. Sky fire. The hydrogen of the comet's tail mixes with the oxygen of Earth's atmosphere and is ignited. Violent lightning, caused by electrical discharges between the Earth and the comet's head. Air made irrespirable, caused by shortage of oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere or by deadly gases, such as methane. Again, methane is not deadly unless you breathe it 100%, because then you're not getting any oxygen. Fires on Earth. The land has been heated by the comet's head and is very dry and hot. Lightning strikes. Fields, forests, and cities flare up. Droughts. Same reason as above, plus climactic changes. Floods. The combustion of the comet's hydrogen in the sky causes not only a shortage of oxygen, but also the formation of huge clouds which condense into torrential rains. Hurricanes. Like the droughts and the floods, both of which will precede and follow the encounter with the comet, the hurricanes are caused by climactic changes. But like the droughts that will immediately precede the encounter and the floods that will immediately follow it, the hurricanes also are caused by the encounter itself. Moreover, the huge sky fires will create powerful fire tornadoes. From this it follows that there will be at least 3 different waves of droughts, floods, and hurricanes before, during, and after the encounter, which is what some prophecies say and is in accord with scientific theory. Darkness, caused by the thick dust and the gases of the comet's tail, and possibly by the thick layers of clouds in the sky, following the combustion of the hydrogen and before the torrential rains begin. The sun then will be blotted out for 3 days. Earthquakes and tidal waves, caused by the gravitational pull of the comet's head. Famines, caused by droughts, fires, and floods. Epidemics, caused by the famines and injuries. It is interesting to note, too, that many prophecies mention that the land will yield abundantly during the period of peace which will follow. This is quite understandable. The violent lightning will have enriched the soil with large quantities of nitrogen. Moreover, it is quite possible that some of the dust which the prophecies say will be released by the comet's tail will be rich in minerals and have fertilizing properties. The very precipitation of the nitrogen will help restore the proper balance of the atmosphere after the binding of so much oxygen into water. Here, for the benefit of those of my readers who may not be aware of it, I must add that water is a combination of oxygen and hydrogen. The combustion of hydrogen binds some oxygen and produces water. Also, the atmosphere which we breathe is made up of various gases, mainly nitrogen and oxygen. We need oxygen in order to survive. The binding of large quantities of oxygen, therefore, causes asphyxiation. Likewise, lightning precipitates the nitrogen of the air into the soil, where it is a fertilizing agent, since all plants need nitrogen, but only a few can absorb it directly from the air. Without this scientific data, it would be difficult to understand what has been said above.